Hey everyone! Today we're diving deep into one of JavaScript's most confusing but essential concepts, this. By the end of this tutorial, you'll understand exactly how this works in different contexts, the 4 binding rules, and how to use it effectively in your code. So what exactly is this? Let me explain the concept. This is a special keyword in JavaScript that refers to the current execution context. It's not a variable, object, or function, it's a reference that changes based on how a function is called. The key points to remember are: first, it's not a variable; second, its value changes depending on the function call; and third, it's fundamental to understanding JavaScript's object-oriented nature. Why is understanding this so important? First, it helps prevent scope-related bugs. Second, it enables proper object-oriented patterns. And third, it makes your code more reusable. Mastering this will make you a better JavaScript developer. There are 4 main rules that determine what this refers to. First, default binding. Second, implicit binding. Third, explicit binding. And fourth, new binding. We'll go through each one in detail. Let's look at default binding. Here we have a simple function called showThis. When we call this function in the global scope, this refers to the global object. In a browser, that's the window object. Notice how we're not calling this function as a method of any object. Now let's see what happens in strict mode. Here we have the same function but with useStrict at the top. When we call showThis, this is now undefined instead of the global object. This is one of the key differences between regular and strict mode. Now let's look at implicit binding. Here we have an object called person with a name property and a greet method. When we call person.greet, this refers to the person object. Notice how the method is called with dot notation on the object. Here's an important gotcha with implicit binding. We're taking the greet method from the person object and assigning it to a new variable. When we call greetfunc, this is now undefined because we've lost the original object reference. Now let's look at explicit binding. Here we have a simple greet function and a person object. Using call, we can explicitly set this to the person object. This is powerful when you need to control the context. Apply works similarly to call but takes the arguments as an array. Here we're passing hi as the greeting parameter. This is useful when you need to pass multiple arguments to a function. Bind is different because it creates a new function with this permanently bound. Here we create a new function called boundGreet with this set to person. This is useful for event handlers and callbacks. Now let's look at new binding. Here we have a person constructor function. When we use the new keyword, this refers to the newly created object. This is how we create instances of objects in JavaScript. Arrow functions have a special behavior with this. Here we have an object with a greet method that contains an arrow function. Notice how the arrow function inherits this from the greet method. This is different from regular functions. Let's see a practical example with event handlers. Here we have a button class that adds a click event listener. Notice how we use bind this to maintain the correct this context. Without bind, this would refer to the DOM element instead of our button instance. Here's another practical example with array methods. Notice how we're using the second parameter of map to set this to an object with a factor property. This is a less common but powerful technique for controlling context. Let's compare regular functions and arrow functions. With regular functions, this is dynamic and depends on how the function is called. With arrow functions, this is lexically scoped and inherits from the surrounding context. This is an important distinction to remember. Here's a common mistake that many developers make. Notice how in the wrong example, this is undefined inside the setTimeout callback. The correct solution is to use an arrow function which preserves this context from the surrounding scope. Another common mistake is forgetting to use the new keyword with constructor functions. Notice how in this example, we're not using new. This leads to this referring to the global object, which can cause unexpected behavior and pollute the global scope. Here's a pro tip that will save you from many headaches. When writing callbacks, especially for event handlers or timers, use arrow functions. This ensures that this maintains the correct context from the surrounding scope. Another important tip is to always use strict in your code. This prevents accidental global variable creation and makes your code more predictable. It's especially important when working with this. When working with class methods, remember that this can be lost when passing methods as callbacks. To maintain the correct context, you can either use arrow functions or explicitly bind the method in the constructor. That's it. You now have a complete understanding of this in JavaScript. We covered the 4 binding rules, learned how to control this with call, apply, and bind, saw practical examples, and avoided common mistakes. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe for more JavaScript tutorials. Happy coding!